So well, in the beginning, we were quite scared of it just because it was the first knee-jerk reaction was like, oh, we're gonna lose our jobs. Like AI is gonna do all our work. And then as we then just decided as a team one day, you know what, let's just embrace it and be very open-minded and see how far we can take it and go. So almost it was a joke, but it's like know thy enemy kind of thing. And we ended up like really getting into it and learning. And then we said like, hey, this is not so bad. And we got really excited about it actually. And then as we learned, it's a little bit of a learning curve in the beginning, but then once it snaps and you get it, it can be quite addictive.
Welcome to Get Discovered, a podcast about AI, SEO, and online discoverability. In this first season of the podcast, we're focusing on simplifying AI. We're taking a step back and trying to discover how people are using it, what AI really is, and hopefully make it easier to understand for you and your business. Today, we're speaking with Ané Wiese, the SEO and AEO lead at SaaS.group. SaaS.group uses a founder-friendly approach to acquire B2B SaaS businesses and take them to the next level. Currently, SaaS.group oversees more than 20 brands, and Ané is a crucial part of the SEO process for each and every one of them. Welcome, Ané.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
Excellent. So, yeah, obviously, we're really trying to start off with establishing a definition for AI, because I think right now, if you go on the street and ask 5 people what it means, you probably have 10 different
Yeah.
answers. I don't know if yeah. So it kind of seems like everyone is operating from a very personal definition of AI. And a lot of times, because ChatGPT and the large language models are now so much in the zeitgeist, that's what I think a lot of people usually think of when we talk about AI, especially people outside of the tech industry. Have you had that experience as well?
Yeah, I guess so. In my friend group, for example, we have people that are very much for it. It's very split. So it's either people that are completely
Mhm.
for it, or it's people that are in fear of it, and they are like saying is we'll take over everything. And so I'm kind of like seeing that two opposites of it most often.
Yeah. So we've been crowdsourcing this a little bit, kind of going out onto the street and asking for definitions in a virtual sense. So let me read a couple of the definitions that we've received, and then we can kind of talk about what AI means to you. So first off, and these are just completely, random picks from our crowdsourcing database. So the question is, what is your definition of AI? One that I'd like to read here. So AI is a tool that compensates for human inefficiency and shortcomings. It is a neutral assistant that, depending on how it is fed with data and used in any area of life, hastens progress or deterioration. That's a really interesting one. A lot of times people talk about it in the context of a large language model, but this one is really talking about compensating for human inefficiency and shortcomings. It's a new one. I haven't heard that one before. Does that resonate with you at all?
Little, I think I'll just put a bit more of a positive spin on on that. But in terms of, I don't think necessarily shortcomings, but I do think, like for example, when I'm using it, like AI, like one of the things I really appreciate or really like about it is that if you are not having a very productive day and you are having like a meh kind of day, then you lean more on using your like AI tools, like different ones depending on what you are using, to kind of still get that ideas flowing and to have like an immediate way of ideating and things, because that creative juices for a person does not flow naturally every single day. So I that's kind of what I like about it, is that it makes you more it makes you more consistent. That's at least what I've found.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say even for myself, just jumping ahead a little bit, talking about how we use it, I use large language models specifically a lot of times as a sparring partner
Yeah.
to help with brainstorming. And it's kind of like you said, an enhancement to my creativity, especially if it's later in the day and I'm tired answering emails and being in meetings all day. It can help me reignite and reconnect with thinking and brainstorming and things like that. It makes it a lot easier for me, for sure. So it's kind of like a partner. And that actually leads into another definition I'd like to read here, which is really interesting. So, again, the question is, what is your definition of AI? And the answer is AI to me is like a super helpful intern who never sleeps, smart enough to assist, fast enough to impress, but still occasionally gets weirdly confident about the wrong answer. Basically, it just needs our strategy to be actually smart. So I think that that connects a lot with
Yeah,
what we're speaking about. So now the really important thing: what is your definition of AI?
actually very similar to the second one that you've just said. At the moment, I know that maybe in a year, if you have to ask me this question in a year's time, it will probably change. And that's how, obviously, as the technology gets better and evolve over time. But at the moment, I also see it very much in that light where it's a great assistant and almost like an intern, where it's capable of doing, at least in our field, a lot of things for us. But you still have to quality check the work and the outputs and so forth. But it is an absolutely great utility tool and for efficiencies and to do certain tasks that you don't have to, well, you can save a lot of time on as well. So it's a great intern.
Yeah, that's a good idea to define it kind of like an intern, almost like a little bit of a Roomba, right? So the Roomba, in the end, it will vacuum the floor, but it will bump up against some walls and the furniture and things like that. So you just need to correct it a little bit here and there. And one thing I've seen, and I don't know how active you are on LinkedIn, but I think when I look at my LinkedIn feed nowadays, the vast majority of it looks like it was just written by ChatGPT or another large language model. It's very formulaic. Everything is using all of the little emoji and symbols. It all follows the same format and all of that kind of stuff. And I think we're starting to come up into a place where a lot of content online is just generated by a large language model, and it's losing a little bit its uniqueness, its character. And then sometimes I get the sense that people are not quality checking. And so we see some crazy things written in there. Have you had that experience as well? Maybe not just on LinkedIn, but in
Yeah, well,
general.
I actually stopped using LinkedIn. I used to be very active on it and up to I think like February, March this year. And then I also started growing tired of just seeing AI content all the time, especially in like the SEO field. That's very tiring because there's so much nuance to SEO. So, and there's a lot of generalistic information that gets posted in the summaries or these posts and that kind of made me disengage with the platform. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I'm seeing this all over, and I think still though there is a way of doing it appropriately and where it can be super effective. We do have brands that do that fantastically, and it really just depends on the strategy and the execution of it, and if you approach it in a smart way. But I just to come back to all the AI content, I do think we will hit a stage where people are going to get AI content fatigue. Just like a few years ago when we had ad fatigue and everyone was so tired of seeing like banner ads everywhere, I think it will definitely hit a point. If you go onto social media, for example, like TikTok or Instagram frequently, it's already annoying seeing all the AI videos all the time, and there's almost no real videos or people content anymore, at least not in any of my feeds. And it is quite annoying, especially if you think like, oh, you're seeing this cool place, you want to travel to it, and then you realize that it doesn't exist. It's not real. So yeah, I think at some point people will become more frustrated with it. But it's again, it's not really the AI's fault. It's the user or the wheel, like the person using it. Because if you're going to produce content at mass and you're going to just throw it out there, of course it's not going to be good quality at all. It's not well thought out. So of course people will get tired of that.
Yeah. I think if we, even where we are today, if we look at the rise in the amount of content that is, for lack of a better term, AI slop, I think we're starting to use that a little bit more and more. It sounds very dramatic. Maybe not everything is bad, but it just has this veneer that lacks authenticity. right? And we're sort of in this uncanny valley of content where if you glance at it quickly, okay, it looks like it makes sense. But if you start to read and especially try to connect with the text and the things that are there and the ideas and all of that being communicated, that's when the shine starts to wear off a little bit more. But if you look at the rise of the percentage of content on social media and outbound sales emails that we receive, and more and more of that has become very obviously large language model based text, right? And if you plot that out in the future, it really seems like 2 or 3 years from now, the vast majority of everything that we as humans are expected to interact with in a digital space will be AI driven or AI generated. And in that place, in that paradigm, human generated content will become even more precious and valuable. And I think that's especially true if we were to focus on marketing, the content that different customers of ours, or just in general, that they put on their blogs or different things like that. It'll be very important for people to have an eye toward what's human generated and what's novel and readable and interesting and all of that kind of stuff in the context of how easy it is to just spin up a website and create a blog that has 10,000 different pages on it. It takes maybe an hour to do something like that with AI. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. Have you thought about kind of where this, if we see the graph, as a percentage of content that's AI generated, have you thought about where that's going and any concerns that come up for you?
On one side, it's you get early adopters and like for example, in our team, we're working SEO, so we usually in this case we were very early adopters, and now everyone else is also starting to get into it. It's becoming more, how would I say, like mainstream. And I think it's necessary, even though it's very annoying, that it has to go through this phase of where people are creating AI slop. And then eventually we'll get to a point, maybe, I hope it's just a year and not longer than that. But we will get to a point where I think people will start realizing, okay, it's not working anymore. It really isn't getting us tangible or long-term results. And then they will learn how to use AI better and in the proper way that is actually useful. And I can give examples of this. I was on Instagram recently and I saw this really cool product because I've got many cats. It's like a toy that they can play with. And I was really interested in it. And then there was this video of this person talking like how she handcrafts it on Etsy and like how she made it. I was ready to order it. And then I realized afterwards it's not actually a real person. It's a drop shipper that went and created a fake founder AI video, and this AI's avatar is being presented as the owner of this company. And then I went and I checked like Amazon and I saw, oh no, there's many people that are selling the exact same product. So it's not really a handcrafted thing like how they're selling. It's completely fake. And this is going to, I think in e-commerce, it's going to be more obvious and hit faster where people are going to get fatigued in this. It's already very obvious like now that I've seen it, I can see it everywhere, especially on, I mean, Instagram is really popular for e-commerce promotion. So you can see it a lot there. And the same will probably happen in SaaS. And this is probably why, like, it's a great idea that you guys are doing like this video series because it shows that you guys really care and that you're real people behind your brand and so on. And I think it creates some sort of trust and certainty when people are signing up or buying the tool as well, because how do they know it's just not a fake shell and you're putting in your card details? How do you know it's a real website? I mean, a domain doesn't necessarily cost so much, so it's easy to set up and
Mhm.
these days easy to build a very professional looking website. You can fake all your avatar and intro videos or fake founder. There's so much that you can do and still not have like I think eventually people won't know whether it's a real company or not. I think to some extent maybe the tool
Right.
is really working and it's useful, maybe they won't care if it's AI operated, but in the most cases, of course, it matters that you connect with your customers and your audience and they can trust that it's a real team behind the software. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I actually watched a YouTube video the other day about a large language model service that calls itself Chat. AI or something like that, but they deliberately designed their logo to look like ChatGPT, but just with slightly like the inverse of colors. And then they've been like bidding on ads on Google for searches for ChatGPT. And so because of the way that Google is structured, where all of the sponsored links are pretty much everything above the fold is a sponsored link when you look for a search. And for the listeners, above the fold just means before you have to scroll down, right? So if you look at it and you search on Google for ChatGPT, it's very likely that you see the sponsored link, which a lot of people don't really check very in depth because it looks like it's ChatGPT, and they charge you for a subscription, and it actually the interface looks like ChatGPT and all of this. And now people are starting to realize, oh, I actually need to double check what I'm clicking on. Even though it was the first result on Google, it's not very obvious it was an ad. And there was a lot of backlash for that because it's inauthentic. And you're giving your credit card information over to a company that we don't even know what it is, where it's based, or anything like that. We'll link to that YouTube investigation in the show notes because it was really good. But I think this speaks to the concern that you're talking about too, which is the wanting to make sure that it's authentic, what we're interacting with, what we're purchasing, and especially in the sense of e-commerce, that makes sense. But I think just in general, it's really important for us to understand the recipe that we found for chocolate chip cookies is, something that a human made one time. There's a really famous example. I think it was a cookie recipe that Gemini recommended adding non-toxic glue to the recipe when someone asked about it. It was one of the examples. I think it was in their demo. And it's just we're really in a strange place with all of this stuff. And I think it's really important for everyone to have a definition of what AI is so that we can start to understand some of the boundaries of it and what to trust, what not to trust, how to be a little bit more critical about the information we see, no matter how it comes to us, especially if it's in video form too, because I think video content has this veneer of professionalism, especially nowadays. You really have to look closely to notice it's not a real person on the video,
Yeah.
you know?
Security and trust is going to become very important for brands to prove and to show as well, and that credibility or creating that credibility. I was just thinking, as you said about the recipe and the glue, it was on TikTok. It was again an AI avatar video that was made really well, and you cannot see that it's an AI at all that's talking. So I have no idea how they've made it. It doesn't look 3D-ish like some of the others do. But it's clearly not real. But it's a pretend doctor giving health advice, and that shouldn't even be something that's allowed. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
a person, and then at the end they promote a particular supplement. So again, it's drop shipping, but they had over 500,000 likes this video and so much engagement. So there's so many people that believe that health information in there. But there's again, like there's many nuances there. What if someone's diabetic, so they can't do that, but it's not disclaimed. It's because they're not a real medical professional. So there's a lot of risks, and hopefully we get to a point where there is some sort of authentication or policies put in place. I think the EU is a little bit more ahead with those things than some other places in the world. But yeah, at that moment, it's up to the brands to prove credibility.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how you are using AI in your day-to-day work and maybe a few examples of things that your team is as well. Like, has it changed how you work or think, either, individually or together? Are there any other things that you've noticed?
Yeah. So in the beginning, we were quite scared of it just because it was the first knee-jerk reaction was like, oh, we're going to lose our jobs. Like AI is going to do all our work. And then as we then just decided as a team one day, you know what, let's just embrace it and be very open-minded and see how far we can take it and go. So almost it was a joke, but it's like know thy enemy kind of thing. And we ended up like really getting into it and learning. And then we said like, hey, this is not so bad. And we got really excited about it actually. And then as we learned, it's a little bit of a learning curve in the beginning, but then once it snaps and you get it, it can be quite addictive. And it became fun. and it ended up being more freeing than anything else because we were able to
Mm.
create certain solutions where we didn't have to book it in for developers, and web developers are often very busy, so you have to wait for them to get to that ticket. So it really enabled us to do certain tasks ourselves and a lot quicker turnaround times because of it. And this is very much like how we use it in our team. It's a utility tool for us. We use it as a very smart assistant where we, yeah, like each of us basically have its intern, and we use it that way where we automate all mundane type of SEO tasks like image, alt text, optimization, and so forth. And then we have more advanced agents like we built on Relevance AI, and they run and do some other tasks for us. So we really use it for productivity and efficiency. And then we have a scale, which maybe
Mhm.
I can give you guys the criteria of our evaluation, like how we do it, and then you can link it into the video as well. But we have this SEO like criteria of when to automate or not kind of thing that we have, or guideline. So if you want to automate a certain task, you determine like how much would it cost, is it a gimmick or is it really going to be awesome? And otherwise, you end up with a lot of different automations in AI, but they're pretty much, there's no real point to them. It was just something you could do, but maybe should you do it? That's a different question. So, and then also, if should the AI hallucinate? What is the business risk of that? So I think that's a really big question to answer. So, for example, automating image alt text is a very low risk. It's not going to be something that a customer sees or be upset about if you have an incorrect image alt text, for example. If you are going to have incorrect pricing information, that's a completely different situational story. So you have to take it and evaluated by a particular thing, and then it has to go through almost like that thinking, and then it becomes quite easy. And this is something I probably would recommend any SEO team or marketing team does, is that they come up with their own definition or internal like policy about how they're using AI as a team, and then come up with a criteria to measure against. Should I create an agent, or should I create or do this with AI? And then this is our internal criteria we evaluate that against. And then that sets it for really, like, it kind of keeps you focused so that you don't end up with an agent graveyard or too many like agents in your library.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. That I like the idea of putting this rubric together, um, because sometimes when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So you get practice building agents, and then you think, oh, I could automate this, I could automate that, I could do this, I can get rid of that. I don't like doing this anymore, so why don't I just set up an agent to do that? And it's good for people to take a step back and really understand the value that they're trying to achieve from that. And I think what you mentioned about AI hallucination is a really good example, understanding what the risks are if it doesn't go well, and making sure that there is at least some kind of a quality check mechanism in place so that you know if it has hallucinated. For example, you mentioned the alt text for images. So I agree, maybe that's pretty low risk if it doesn't get the description exactly right. But do you and the team have a way to do some quality checks on that? Is it that you're double checking each time it's generating the alt text, or every once in a while? Can you give me a sense of how you check that, and maybe for other things that you've automated?
For image alt text is very easy. We would just crawl the whole website with Screaming Frog, and then we will just in the program itself, in the interface of dashboard, you can see all the image alt text that pulls through there. So you're able to see match to the URL if you can all your H1s, whether contextually it makes sense to what the image describes then. That's a very easy or fast check to do if you want to. You can do the same with metadata as well. And then with depending on if you want to automate it or not, so we've got half, what I call like almost like half automations as well. So that is where we automate to a point, and then we do not automate the publishing of it. So we automate up to the generation, it goes
Mm.
into a document, then it goes to the specialist, they do the final review, and they upload it or publish it to the website. So it's not, so that's kind of like how we do many of the more advanced like on-site optimizations is we have agents that do certain parts of on-site optimization. So first, we do not generate content with AI, and I'll get to that now in a few minutes. But we do, for example, we used Relevance AI to create on-site optimizer for us, and it's based off of our criteria of how we would usually do on-site optimization. And you can control all that logic in Relevance AI, and it is pretty good at following your instructions if you give it very thorough instructions. If you give any AI platform very like a vague prompt, it will automatically fill in the blanks by itself, and then you might not get the result you want. But if you give it a lot of information, or you give it the knowledge, and you give it a very specific or clear logic, it does a much better job. And I think this is one thing people miss often when they use it, is that they do not figure out how much detail they should give the AI to get good results. So we've got an agent to do on-site optimization, and it does. You will not be able to tell the difference on your website if we've done it manually or if our agent has done it, because it's mimicking us pretty well in terms of our formulas that we've used. We've also done it on many of our, not everyone yet, but we are getting to that, where we are templatizing to a certain extent, like page structures, so that a blog or a guide usually will have a certain structure to it, or product landing page. So it's easier if you have almost like not templatized content, but like the templatized layout of the web page. It is then much easier to automate or create agents for your web pages as well. Yeah, so it ends up outputting it either in a Notion document or in Relevance itself or in Google Docs, depending on what you prefer. And then we have the SEO specialist review it, and they take only the things that they think is then fine. So if there is some extra things in there that's fluff or that we don't like, we just don't put it in. Again, like we use it as an assistant. So it's exactly like how an intern might have done some of the work, but you still need someone to quickly check and then implement. And even just doing that saves a ton of time. And hopefully, maybe in the future, we can take it further if we learn to, like, if AI gets better and we can trust it a lot more to not hallucinate. But this is up to the point. And I would just say for anyone like listening, that if they're like saying no, and maybe an AI can do everything, if they feel that way, if you take something you're an expert in, like any subject you are an absolute expert in, and go interact with an AI, and you will notice it's not 100% accurate. If you are not, like, for example, I recently researched something about nutrition and I used ChatGPT. It all sounded super impressive to me. I'm not a specialist in nutrition. So everything there sounded like, wow, okay, that's true, it's correct, because it's so good at like sounding like an expert and so good in grammar. And then I researched something that has to do with it had to do with cameras, because I do photography as a hobby, and I know a little bit about that subject. So some of the information there was not correct. And again, it's something it usually fails in, not fails, but it usually happens when when it is nuance that's applied to a particular situational thing. So in photography, there's nuance. In SEO, there's nuance. In health, there's nuance. So it depends on the industry, but it's something to keep in mind, that almost like if you have used expert content writers in the past, especially if you are in a very technical field or health or law or something, maybe think that before cutting them, that they maybe get them as editors or something that still keep your experts, like the subject matter experts, because the output will sound really like impressive, but it can be very misleading and nuanced, and then you end up alienating your very audience you're creating the content for, because most likely they already know a little bit about the subject. It's not okay, most people or most SaaS companies isn't necessarily targeting beginners. They're targeting people that already know some of that subject, or maybe even are experts in that subject. So you will just alienate your audience at the end of the day because they will spot what's missing as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good rubric to judge by. If there's something that involves some nuance, that's when it's kind of should trigger an alert that you need to be more mindful of what's coming out. And maybe on a high level, it can make sense, but if you get into some nitty-gritty details of that, it's important to really run it through, to have a human in the loop, right? An expert in that way. I think sometimes it's interestingly, this whole season of the podcast, we've talked about what is the definition of AI, and then we have discussions about it. And every single time our discussions jump into the large language models as the canonical example. So I think that's kind of interesting to note. Also, too, though, I think if we're talking about large language models, not everyone understands what is actually working under the hood. Because at the end of the day, a large language model is nothing more than a prediction engine, right? It's just saying, okay, this is the word that is most likely to be the correct one to come next, and so on and so forth. And that probabilistic model comes from all of the training data that it read or, analyzed and all of that. But there's a probability for every single word and every single sentence and every single paragraph and every single response to every single prompt that may or may not be correct. And it's not always 100%, right? And it's just really difficult, I think, for some people who don't understand that, not to take at face value the responses that come from large language models because, like you said, they sound so darn confident, right? Grammatically, they're perfect. They use the right words in the right places and all of that, and it really just creates a facade of confidence and surety that isn't true.
Yeah.
It's directionally correct, but there are a lot of times when you see it bumping up against the limits, and yeah, it's important to kind of keep that in mind, I guess. So that's interesting. So I think what we've talked about so far, think of it as an intern, right? Would you have your intern, write legal copy to submit to the court? Probably not if you're in a lawsuit or something like that. The same goes for everything that you would do, and even for your personal life, right? You wouldn't necessarily have your intern write something without taking a glance at it first. And then also, if we're thinking about the large language models, realizing that that is actually at the core a mathematical prediction engine. And we need to be aware of the fact that, especially when things are more nuanced, your example of photography, but I think almost any field, if you want to talk in depth about a subject, does have some nuance, that it's important to have a human in the loop. And I think it's really key to understand the expectations that a lot of these companies are setting for how the agentic future will completely take over jobs and whole companies at some point in the near future is maybe over promising. Would you agree with that? At least to where the technology is today.
Well, I was just like thinking as you were speaking now as well, like one thing, like all these AI LLM platforms are not necessarily created equal as well. And there's not a lot of at the moment data transparency. So they don't necessarily say or release like all the websites or where they get all their information from. And we've seen this where it's like there are ways to abuse some of that. For example, um, if you were to do a content farm, like so just maybe for people that don't know, a content farm is usually a set of a lot of cheap websites that are put together, and you post or create content at mass, and you just publish it for the purpose of spamming the web everywhere. And some of these LMs that when they scrape information off of the public web, they can scrape these spam junk sites as well, and that again updates their databases or influence what they collect. And of course, there are platforms that are trying to put processes in place to reduce that a lot so that their information is correct. Or they're partnering with, like, for example, ChatGPT partners or uses Bing, and also Google's results. So there is some sort of at least quality step or quality control step there, but it's kind of like different for each platform. So also there's something to think about. And um, yeah, there's not much transparency at the moment of where the information comes from. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the future. So obviously it seems like your team is pretty advanced in terms of how you're leveraging AI. And I think one of the ways you're able to do that is because you recognize the limitations. And so it's actually a productivity multiplier instead of something that is kind of a mixed bag. But what would be in the next 2 or 3 years some things that you would like to be solved or simplified by AI in the context of your work or how your team collaborates that it's not quite there yet? Do you have any examples of where you would like to see it evolve in the next few years?
I'm a big fan of the vibe coding interfaces. So this
Okay.
is why I like Relevance AI because it saves you so much time. Like before they had that update, before you were able to just describe the agent that you wanted to build and the sequence it should run in, you had to think and come up with that sequence, and that took time as well. And you had to kind of think like what tools can you connect, how can you build it out. Then you have to use like maybe a mind map tool or something to first map it out for yourself, and then you would go to relevance and put it together and see if it works, hope it works, and if it does, then great. If not, you have to figure out why not, where did you go wrong, and you have to fix it. And now that it's really saving a ton of time where it can take 5 to 10 minutes to create an agent because you're just describing, it asks you follow-up questions, and then it creates that agent. And you still have to test it and you can tweak it afterwards, but it saves a ton of time. And I kind of hope in the future that more SEO tools, for example, will have that interface because like imagine how awesome like Screaming Frog is a very popular and favorite tool of ours in our team, and it would be very cool if you were able to open that and say extract all of it. You could just kind of give it the instructions, and it already has all the data because it collects everything of the website, but it does those summaries and things for you within the interface itself and so on. So that would be very useful because we spend a lot of time on analysis often, and so that could be a very useful feature for many of the SEO tools we use. So that I hope to see more of. I don't want an AI to come up with something for me. I want to give it my knowledge and I want to give it the information, and it should take that and do something for me. So I don't want to just
Mhm.
give it a topic and it gives me content. That's not what I want. I wanted to make my day more productive. So more, hopefully there is more focus with all the AI tools when it comes to productivity specifically, and more features and things are available in the future focused on that. And for me, that makes sense. Kind of like they let the experts be the experts in what they do, especially with all the nuanced fields that you get, and rather focus on productivity type of features or things that will just make it easier for us to do our work. And yeah, that is what I think would be useful. But it's like it really is up to people what's going to happen because it can either I think it's an awesome technology. Whether it's going to be used for good or bad is going to be up to society and up to people. So hopefully it goes into a more positive direction than negative, and where it is going to be used
Mhm.
for good and not so much for scams and spam and things like that.
Yeah, I think we have a little bit of a, I think we're at a little bit of a fork in the road. I think technology, especially or anything in general, is inherently good or bad. It's more so how it sits in the context of the way that humans interact with it or think of it or leverage it as a tool or whatnot. And I think we can see a lot of good examples, but we do see some not so great examples of AI and especially content generation being used for bad. And I don't know if you are following the news with Grok. There were some recent updates
No.
to, yeah, it's so Grok. For anyone who doesn't know, is kind of the XAI, so the Twitter/X/ Elon Musk associated large language model that's built into Twitter. Well, now it's X, but I still call it Twitter. They made some tweaks, and it is speaking or responding in a very politically incorrect, I would say, very concerning way all of a sudden. And I think it just shows how easy it is for these models that are actually all owned by private corporations who have their own commercial incentives operating behind the scenes, for them to tweak things here and there and start to generate something that could maybe be seen as a way to socially engineer large groups of people by the way that it spreads information or disinformation, different things like that. And it's an unfortunate expression of that. But I think on the other hand, we see, for example, a lot of the things that you've talked about with your team's use of AI and relevance AI and things like that. There are a lot of great examples. So I agree. I hope that it goes in the right direction. But I think it's really important for everyone to become more literate when it comes to AI, understanding what it is, not just large language models, but what this agentic future actually looks like, and also how to be skeptical and think critically and understand the limitations of it so that we can engage with it in the right way.
Yes.
And content farms and whatever start to lose their power because we'll be more aware of the fact that what we're looking at on social media is something that's well, fake, for lack of a better term.
I really think there should be policies put in place, more stricter policies in general put in place on this, because AI is a really powerful tool. And it's if it's just left unchecked, then it can create a lot of damage. So there definitely is a need for policy. But it's always the case. There's always technology first, and then the policies come a few years later. So hopefully, it
Yeah.
comes sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well, great. So if anyone's sort of curious about AI, what would be a few resources that you recommend? It could be newsletters, podcasts, specific tools, thought leaders to follow. Can you share anything with the listeners on that?
Yeah. Well, actually, if you are interested in starting to learn how to create your own AI agents for marketing, for example, or specific for SEO or content or whatever, I actually do recommend starting with Relevance AI, because you'll pick it up. There's lots of YouTube videos already out there and how to do it as well. Plus, it's very nice UX that they have, and it's really easy to, as I said, to describe. Don't put pressure on yourself by having a perfect agent in the beginning. Just kind of learn how to do it and how to get better at describing the agents you're building. People are also using it for, because of how it works out the sequences or logic for you. You can, if you prefer to use something more complex than Relevance AI, you can use something like N8N, but then you can still use relevance to uh, ideate or to create that first sequence and then rebuild that and add on to your in build that you have. And in terms of resources, I recommend Reforge. They've published some interesting marketing content on that. And just to go and read what people are saying, like on LinkedIn, actually, not the AI content itself, but read the comments, not the posts of like what people are
Okay.
saying there. And the same with on Reddit. It's obviously the post itself these days are all a lot AI. So I always go into the comments and I read what people are saying there, because there you get the real information, or how people feel about it or what they say. So yeah, I think that's a good start. And then AI is not something you are going to learn by watching like 100 YouTube videos on it or listening to many podcasts or things. It's a very practical thing. So you have to get your hands dirty and you have to go and try it and build things, and it can be anything. Like you don't have to create something for work. If create something for yourself so that you have that skill and you start learning it. Maybe you're in a position where you're at a company where you are not the person that's going to be responsible for creating an agent. Maybe there's someone else that's more senior than you are appointed to create agents. Then in that case, don't sit and like wait that yeah that don't have it limited to your team. Then go and create your own agent for yourself in your day-to-day life, or just start using it more. And maybe set some fun goals for yourself to, like, how can I use it in the next 2 weeks? Like, if there's me just try to, even if you don't want to use it forever, just try to use it for 2 weeks and see how, and you'll be pleasantly like surprised. So I can give a fun example. So we've renovated, we started renovating our house, and I am not an artistic person. So I have like in terms of like paint colors I can choose, but when it comes to like decorations and furniture or like how to arrange room, not so good at that. And I just want something to look like Pinterest style. So I really want something that's really nice. So what I started doing was I took a photo of the room and I put it into ChatGPT and I said like, what can I do with this room? This is typically the style type I liked. And it analyzed the photo and it then gave me recommendations. And it was actually really good recommendations that I got from it. So that was one way I've used it just in my personal life. And then what I've also done was we wanted to paint one of our rooms a very like a certain color. And then I asked it, I took a photo, but the room was not painted that color yet. So we took a photo of it, say we said make the walls this color, and it painted the walls that color, and it kept the image exactly the same. It didn't change much of everything else. And then we ended up like not liking it. So luckily we didn't buy the paint and we didn't go with that color because we would have hated it at the end. So we ended up with a completely different one.
Interesting.
So there are fun
Yeah.
applications for AI as well that can really just be a useful tool for your day to day.
Nice. Very interesting. Well, excellent, Ané. And if the listeners want to find you, do you want to share maybe your LinkedIn or anywhere else people can look you up?
Yeah, it's basically just LinkedIn, and we I think I have a I don't know. I think it's just LinkedIn. I don't think we have any more profiles on the website. So it's just, yeah, LinkedIn. I can give you the LinkedIn profile link.
Yeah, we'll put it in the notes.
Cool.
Well, thanks for your time today. Good chat. Thanks for tuning in to Get Discovered, a podcast where AI, SEO, and the future of online visibility collide. For more about us, swing by Prerender.io. We make sure your site isn't hiding from Google, Bing, or the next-gen AI bots sniffing around for fresh content. I'm Joe Walsh. See you next time.